Welcome again to everyone who's joined us today. My name is Alex Dirksen. I'm the Community Development Manager for the IWSCC, the Inclusive Workplace and Supply Council of Canada. We're Canada's national certifying body for veteran-owned and disabled-owned businesses, and we connect those business owners with opportunities across Canada. We also engage in advocacy, and we do our best to produce meaningful content and opportunities to learn, like the one you signed up for today. So thanks so much for joining us. This event also does come with some accessibility features, so you can of course access closed captions and the transcript for the event with the CC closed captions button in your toolbar at the bottom of your window. Or if you'd like to access an ASL interpreter, you can also click on the interpretation feature, the globe icon at the bottom of your toolbar, to view an American Sign Language interpreter for today's event. So I think that's enough about me. You know, we have a lot of great material to get through, and we have a wonderful guest joining us here today. So without further ado, I'd really love to hand it off to our guest from Mindset, the executive producer of Mindset Courses and owner of Disability Today Publishing Network and IWSCC certified business, Mr. Jeff Tiessen. So Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Alex. My pleasure. Really pleased to be here, of course, and share a little bit about the course in that. So, yeah, as you said, I'm president and publisher of Disability Today Publishing Group, a media company I started over 30 years ago. I'm also executive producer of my firm's Mindset brand. And what that is e-learning content in and around disability inclusion and allyship. And in a moment, I'm going to share a short traditional video about the course and a little bit about me, a little bit more about me personally, actually. So, but I think it's important for me to say that, you know, my work in disability inclusion started when I was a kid. I was born with hands, lost both in an injury, and joined the disability community when I was 11, almost 12 years old. And after my injury, me and my parents quickly learned that the most effective pathway to inclusion for me and my new circumstance started with familiarity, with conversations, with introductions, with understanding. And I had played a lot of sports before losing both hands. And my dad thought it was a really good idea that I get back into hockey. I wasn't so sure. I had a lot of reservations about that. But he spent months whittling away at an old hockey stick, adapting it really, so that I could play with two prosthetic hands. And came to one Saturday morning, and again, I wasn't all that enthused, but off we went to the arena, to the rink to rejoin my team. And I was really surprised what I found there, and that was being welcomed with open arms by everyone. And this was the late 70s too, where, you know, I was a handicapped kid, you know, language we don't use so much anymore. And, you know, what I didn't know at the time is that my dad spent as much time talking with the coaches and players and parents of the players as he did fashioning that funny looking hockey stick. And, you know, as much as I wasn't super comfortable returning to the rink that day, everybody else was. And my dad had alleviated their fears on what to say, what to do. And their familiarity with me and my new disability provided them with a comfort level and a confidence and a competence level, you might say. So this has kind of been my life, educating peers, coaches, teachers, neighbors, community members, colleagues, and strangers, and abilities as well. And for the most part, that work has been in the form of public speaking and publishing magazines and books. And now add to that our e-learning mindset modules. So I want to get into some disability literacy 101, I should say, with a quick 2-minute overview of what the course is about. So let's start with that, a quick one.
Hi, I'm Jeff Tiessen, a three-time Paralympian, a publisher, a best-selling author, an educator, an advocate, and an amputee of over 45 years. I love to travel, love being a dad, love the sea, horses, and meeting new people. That's me. But what I'm really excited to introduce you to is mindset. What's mindset? Well, for mindset learners, it's inclusion education specific to disability. It's about workplace relationships, employee allyship. Mindset is a journey. It's a journey into disability education through the lens of lived experience. Understanding disability is not always about training. We know that inclusion is best achieved through familiarity. And with that comes comfort and confidence and competence. I'm the host, and joining me is a cast of leading subject experts, all members of the disability community, and each sharing authentic experiences and perspectives to learn from. You'll learn from some who've done some incredibly inspiring things, but they'll tell you, emphatically tell you, that grocery shopping and walking their dog aren't among them. We expose what we call inspiration exhaustion. We talk about semantics, language around disability, and getting past concerns of saying the wrong thing. And ableism, what it looks and sounds like, and the tools to disable it. We talk about bias and stereotypes too. As humans, we're wired to categorize, even when we don't mean to. Unconscious bias. Our experts offer great advice on how to move past what we've learned in the past. Disability etiquette, interaction with service animals and personal equipment like wheelchairs comes with courtesies, and that includes when and how to offer help. Allyship is all about mindset.
So what I want to do is share a little bit of content from just 4 of the 7 modules that make up Disability Literacy 101. A little bit on ableism, a little bit on inspiration exhaustion, some bias, and a quick flyby on disability etiquette. So disability is complicated, that's for sure. And what our course works to do is simplify some of these topics as best as possible, particularly for the casual learner and even the reluctant learner. And it's not lost on us that many folks who'll be taking this course didn't sign up for it. Their managers did for them. So it was our job to make training, a word we don't use all that much, as interesting and maybe as simple as possible. And for those here with us today that are part of the disability community, I know I'm singing to the choir, bear with me. And those that are professionally immersed in DEI, I hope there's some perspectives and some insights from some of our cast, maybe myself too, that can help you in your work too. Just a bit of maybe a different perspective. So,
And Jeff, Jeff, I hate to interrupt you. I'm just going to pause for one moment just to make a quick adjustment to improve our video quality there. Apologies for a quick delay.
And Alex is at the controls. He's working the slide deck for me. And thanks, Alex.
All right, and thank you so much for your patience.
All right, so we are on to the next slide. Great. I often talk about the disability community, and back up one, Alex. The disability community, it's as diverse as society itself, obviously. And even with all of our differences, we often get painted with one brush, a broad brush, and that being disabled, or even the disabled. And I like to think of the community more as a canvas of fine strokes. And even those of us with the same disability, be it amputation or spinal cord injury or neurodivergence, each of us are very different, of course, and in how we identify with our disability and how we manage that. And then you add to that intersectionality and multiculturalism, all parts of our identities too. So I would think most would know among us here that we are this country's largest minority group and one that does not discriminate when it comes to membership. Anyone can join at any time. And the directory of disability categories, it continues to grow. Episodic disabilities like arthritis and diabetes, a recognized newcomer, and chronic health disabilities like asthma and persistent pain and fatigue. So, in keeping with that, yes, disability is complicated, all right, but it doesn't have to be difficult. And it gets a lot simpler when we get to know people from the disability community and learn from our experiences and our perspectives. And with that familiarity, we find levels of comfort and confidence and competence, like I talked about earlier. So let's start with some familiarity by meeting some of the cast members from Mindset's Disability Literacy 101. It's about a 5-minute video. It's longer than the rest, I promise. It features 8 or 9 cast members who introduce themselves to you. And it's very intentional because, as I keep talking about familiarity, we wanted to start the course this way for folks that may have no connection to disability to gain a little bit of comfort as the course kicks off. So, Alex, away we go.
I'm a very complicated person, but I'm just a guy trying to make it through this crazy world. I love hockey. I play hockey. I've played internationally wheelchair hockey. I went to university, took business management, and I've worked my current employer for 25 years. I love my job. I love music. I go to as many concerts as I can. Yeah, I just try to make the most out of life.
Downing Harrington is a wife, a mother, a person living with disabilities, and a consultant, a sister, a daughter. I'm all kinds of things.
I fell into disability quite literally about 27 years ago, and I keep falling. It's been a long and bumpy road, but I wouldn't go back and change it. I'm where I am today and who I am today because of it.
So I'm Holly. I work as a communicative disorders assistant at a children's hospital. So I help kids with their speech and language needs. I live in Toronto. I love going to concerts. I play guitar, but not very well. I love going out for dinners, and I've been using a wheelchair since I was 11.
I love video. I love photography and computers, and I'm also a really big sports fan. I'm on the autism spectrum, and one of the things that means for me is that it often takes me an extra second or two to process information.
I'm Joanne Smith, and I am a nutritionist by trade right now. I used to be a host and producer, reporter in television for almost 15 years, covering stories on disability issues across Canada. And I also love sports. I love to hand cycle and kayak. I love to travel. That's probably my number one passion. I've traveled the world. And yeah, I just like to have as much fun as possible. Chair or no chair. Yeah, you find a way.
So I have tunnel vision is all I have left. No peripheral vision whatsoever, so I cannot see what's below me, above me, or to the left or right. So I need to look at every person who I'm speaking to, and when I'm looking at them, I try to concentrate on their nose, eyes, or mouth, and that's all I see, and that's where the lip reading comes in. I don't always get it, but because I've been doing it for so many years, it becomes it's certainly a habit for me to lip read. So I like to think I'm pretty good at it.
I think in the beginning of my injury, I absolutely only seen the wheelchair. I only seen disability from the wheelchair standpoint because that's all I really knew. As I was growing and learning and interacting more with the community and friends and learning about their disabilities, I realized that it's not just about the wheelchair, whether you have autism or limited function or traumatic brain injury, the list goes on and everybody is different.
I started doing a little bit more research about autism and ADHD in women and in girls, and it explained my entire life. All of a sudden, my entire childhood, high school, like university, everything, all of a sudden it was like, that's why. That's why I didn't fit in. That's why I had a hard time understanding things that everybody else seemed to get. And now finally there's this explanation and someone saying, you're not weird, you're neurodiverse. Now I embrace that. That's just who I am. So I don't see it as something separate to myself. It's just part of myself. It's what makes me me.
Really remarkable people. And we spent 2 full days doing video capture, and I was blown away. It was a learning experience for me, even being part of the disability community for 40 some years, and just how authentic and honest all these folks were. The hardest part was editing down to short 12 or 13 minute modules. Yeah, I'm really proud of them. Now that you've met some of them, we're going to jump right into ableism. And it really does all start here. Ableism is like what the roots of a tree are to its branches. It's in our language, it's in our words and expressions. We see it in the media, we see it in social media, we see it in terms of what's thought to be brave and inspirational. And, we see it in our biases too, of who's normal, there's air quotes around that, and capable and productive. So next one, Alex. We hear this a lot. You don't look disabled, or I don't think of you as disabled. What's wrong with your leg? You're married with that intonation? What do they all have in common? Ableism, ableist expressions. You don't look disabled. It sounds like a comment, but to some it can mean I need to prove that I have a disability. And what's wrong with your leg? It's a difference that's looked at as a deficit and needs to be fixed. And you're married? Well, why wouldn't I be, or why couldn't I be? So ableism, it's a system of beliefs. It's social prejudice. Abilities are superior to physical, intellectual, or neural differences. Ableism privileges non-disabled bodies as normal or ideal. One of our cast members referred to ableism as the shark and not the water. And I'm sorry, I mixed that up. Not the shark, but the water. And what she means by that is ableism isn't one biting comment or one assumption. It's much more than that. It's pervasive. It lives in our beliefs and our actions, like the water. And it makes its presence known in 4 different ways. Enlightened ableism, unconscious ableism, mundane ableism, and outright disableism. So what's all that mean? Enlightened ableism is like not walking the talk. And we know that's not plain language, and that's why we describe underneath what that means. It's talking a good game, but persisting with practices that stereotype. When it comes to unconscious ableism, we look at it as akin to asleep at the wheel, just not aware what they're doing or saying is in fact insensitive. Mundane ableism, kind of like you couldn't care less. Not interested in understanding at all. Doesn't matter. And then there's the outright disableism, where ableism favors able-bodied people and prioritizes people without disabilities. Disableism is flat out discrimination against disabled people, like racism or sexism. So how do we disable ableism? In just a few words, we name it. We got to recognize it, identify it in ourselves. We confront it, meaning challenge it. And then we have an opportunity, hopefully, to change it, to do something about it. We've got in the course 2 very personal takes on ableism. From Leanne, the first is quite internal and talks about her own ableism, and the second, a little bit more external. So we'll run these back to back, Alex.
I too am ableist, like, if you can believe it, how I came face to face with my own ableism and just came to realize just how much I oppress myself because I want to look, like I'm making valuable contributions and, doing so as perfectly with, without any real effort. And, that was a hard realization, a hard thing to face, all the ways which I judged myself as not being good enough. But when I really looked at, just how false, I was going to say a different word for that, but how false, and I mean, everyone's imperfect, right? And so came to accept myself as, imperfect and gnarly.
I think the most challenging and deciding thing in my life is society's understanding of who I am. Because society has a very clear picture of people with disabilities that need to be fixed. That somehow there's a defect that needs to be fixed. And I don't feel that way. I don't feel that there's anything about me that needs to be fixed. I think what needs to happen is I need to get out there and share myself with other people and my experience. And I find the most disabling thing is the resistance to that. I've heard from other professionals that I've worked with that you people want too much. And so I say, yes, that's us people, my tribe, my people, we want to live just like you live. And we want to participate the way you participate.
So much of everything that we address in mindset really is rooted or stems from ableism, like I mentioned. And as a segue to my next piece, like inspiration exhaustion. So we call this module "No Praise Required." And inspiration, we all look for it at times. It's no different for people with disabilities, of course. We look for inspiration too, and we provide it. But too often, unfortunately, for simply doing everyday, ordinary things. And that's not gratifying. And for some, it's quite insulting too. And over time, for most, it's exhausting. It's tiresome. A lot of people with disabilities have done really remarkable and inspiring things, but they'll all tell you, and certainly the cast mindset all agreed, grocery shopping, where we get these comments so often, is not among them. Buying apples is not inspirational. And deeper than that, it's not a limit of our capabilities or our capacity. So we've got mindsets, Diana and Donna. They talk about unwanted praise and importantly, how it impacts them. So we'll go to the next video. This will come up at the end, so we'll have a chance to read that a little clearer. So yeah, go ahead, Alex, with the video.
Okay, so when I think about myself, how do I view myself? Well, I'm a mother, I'm a sibling, I'm a social worker. All things, I own a home, I have a dog. These are all things that people do in their day-to-day life. Why, because I can do it, does that make it inspiring for people? I just live a normal life. Normal life. Because I don't know what that is. But, you know, and so I don't know. I get up in the morning, I go to work like most people. I run a home. I cook meals. I have friends. These are all very natural things. Why is it inspiring that I do it versus someone else? It isn't, and it shouldn't be. I'm normal-ish.
When I hear someone talk like that, where they tell me, you know, how amazing it was that I did something, I kind of die a little bit inside at first, because then I realize that that person's not comfortable with me. And I would much rather that we could be real with one another and acknowledge that there's a difference between us just as human beings, not because I happen to sit in a wheelchair, and focus on connecting with each other in that moment, as opposed to making yourself more comfortable by making me different than I am.
I'll just read this for accessibility purposes. This woman, Jessica Calvin Fozzard, she's a influencer activist from the UK, actually. And she says, "I'm not brave for having a disability. It's not a choice. I don't choose it like clothes off a rack. We didn't say, I'll take this one, so no one else has to. This is just who I am." You know, our cast, there was a collective voice that, you know, it said, we don't want to be objects of inspiration. But we find that a lot in social media, like this popular one that I have seen many a time. And it reads, "Never ignore somebody with a disability. You don't realize how much they can inspire you." Ugh. Why is this so offensive? Well, certainly it objectifies. It diminishes one group of people for the benefit of another group. But two, it's so transactional that you can get something from us. But if you can't, well, then it's maybe okay to ignore us. And this woman, by the way, is not a wheelchair user. We know that. We make a point of that in the media portrayals module about unauthentic representation. This is Amy Mullins, and she's an athlete, an actress, a model. She did not create this meme that presents her as an object of inspiration. I mean, the message essentially is, look at me, things can't be so bad for you. Her response? People presume my disability has to do with being an amputee, but that's not the case. Insecurities are disabilities, and I struggle with those like anyone else. And then the killer classic for us: the only disability in life is a bad attitude. The late Stella Young, a renowned Australian disability rights advocate, said this about that: "It's just not true. No amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it turn into a ramp." She talked about a library or a shelf of books, and standing beneath it doesn't turn them into braille for those with visual impairments or vision loss. Disabilities due to disability when someone with a disability is saying or doing something that is remarkable or extraordinary. on to bias. And I think this one, for inspiration exhaustion, I think was my favorite. I think this module is of most interest we're finding to our learners because we all stereotype. We all have implicit biases, unconscious ones, and we can't help it sometimes. Our brains are hardwired to take shortcuts. But most of those biases are generalizations about a particular group of people, and most are oversimplified and untrue and unfair and typically negative. Stereotypes and disabilities, so many of them. Here's just a couple that our cast shared, and again, how they impact them.
I remember one time going to the hospital and one of the nurses was looking at me after however long and she's like, "Oh, so you got shot?" And I was actually like, "No." And I was very offended. I was like, "No, I was working and, and somebody wasn't paying attention, dropped a magnet on my head and crushed me in a car, and it changed the course of my life forever." It saved my life, but still, to have somebody just assume that right off the bat, it's kind of like, what the heck, And then, is this how you see everybody else? And then what does everybody else think about me? So now you're going out into the community and you're feeling a little bit insecure because you might see somebody looking at you and you're like, well, what are they thinking, And then now it affects how you dress and what you do and how you carry yourself. And because these perceptions and assumptions and biases that people carry, and it's interesting.
I think early on, one of the misconceptions that, I remember as a younger person was that having a physical disability meant that somehow I wasn't smart. Somehow those two went together. I remember in high school, I remember them saying, "I think she needs to take an IQ test." Rocking it, scored a 131, just for the record. I've also had people say things to me like, I'll never forget this. This was very eye-opening because it wasn't that many years ago. Where somebody said, "What? You have a family? You drive and you work?" Like they were flabbergasted that this would actually be the reality for me. And so it always sort of takes me back to, wow, we're not 100% where we need to be, right?
Often I have a hard time because my disability is more invisible now than it used to be. So there was a time when I relied heavily on accessibility equipment and crutches, and it was very obvious looking at me that I was struggling and having a hard time just sort of moving through the world. I ended up having both my hips replaced, and so in some ways my ability to do everyday things has vastly improved. But I still have restrictions. I'm still undergoing a lot of physio and trying to regain a lot of things that I sort of lost over the years when my body was really literally deteriorating. And I think that often people see me and say things like, "Oh, you don't look disabled," especially if I'm using like my parking permit, for example. And it's fascinating to me, first of all, that people just assume that disabilities are always visible. And that there's so much stigma around, like, we have this ideal of what a disabled person looks like. And I think even, in school and stuff, like we teach kids about service dogs, we teach kids about, accessible entrances and wheelchairs and these pieces that I think are really visible. But I think the reality is, like, as most of us age, like, we develop disabilities, but there's so much stigma attached to disabilities that we don't even necessarily identify it that way.
So bias and it comes down to beliefs. Like, beliefs are shaped in our perspectives, our worldview, you might say. And here certainly are some of those contributors: culture and religion, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. They're all filters on how we see and interact with others. So in the course, we have a reflection stop, and it comes at a point where we want folks to really just take a minute and take stock, you might say, in what biases you might have or harbor. And we asked them to pause and really honestly look at what their worldview is of Tally Osborne. Tally was adopted shortly after she was born. So were her 19 siblings, half of which have complex disabilities, like she does, but says she lives a very normal, always lived a very normal, quote unquote, life. She jokes, though, aside from dinner time being like the UN with all the different ethnicities and different body types at it. She's a dancer. She's a singer-songwriter. She's a body positivity educator. She was recruited to be the punk rock museum supervisor in Las Vegas. And one of her favorite things to do is the freedom of driving her own car. And then we introduce folks to Nicole Flynn and ask for the same reflection pause. So Nicole has Down syndrome. She's a photographer, conservationist, business owner, synchronized swimmer, and a published book author. Sticking to bias. It's worth a quick note on microaggressions. And first, I got to say, there was nothing micro about what Anthony shared with respect to the assumption that he was shot because of the color of his skin, or what Diane talked about in terms of not being smart because she has cerebral palsy. Microaggressions, they're much more subtle. It can be verbal or nonverbal, and mostly unintentional by well-intentioned folks, but over time, like the inspiration exhaustion piece, they do take their toll. So a common example, and I think a lot of people with disabilities may relate to this, that when restaurant or bar servers ask our spouses or friends what we would like to order, and that's denial of dignity. Another one, the flip comment, well, we all have a disability of some sort. That's denial of disability experience. And of course, the inevitable, what happened to you? In its so many forms, what happened to you? What happened to you? That's denial of privacy. And it's the number one question I've been asked by strangers throughout my life. For sure. And introduce yourself. I'd be happy to share. Maybe not happy, but I will share. But I came to realize that often it's just people's curiosity getting the best of them. And that's not to say it's a good thing. So my new response is, why do you want to know? And sometimes they have someone that's an amputee in their family. And sure, we engage in that conversation. But there is a privacy boundary or barrier that needs to exist for people with differences, for sure. So what do we do about these opinions and beliefs? Again, quickly, we stick to the facts. We ask ourselves if we're making assumptions. Can we be more aware? We can connect with people who are different from us and listen to understand. We can bring bias to the surface and hold ourselves accountable. Unconscious bias, difficult but not impossible to change. And it's not so much about deleting old information. That's hard for us to do, but accumulating new information, new perspectives, and new learning. Lastly, a quick flyby on disability etiquette, meaning common courtesies that are common to us in the disability community, but maybe not so common to those who don't know us. And we certainly understand there's a fear factor, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of doing the wrong thing. And I think next up, yes, a video. The last, and Evan and Donna speak to that fear factor quite insightfully. Go ahead, Alex.
I think that people without disabilities are most afraid of, I think, two things. I think one is offending people with disabilities. I think that that we sort of have this mind frame of like, well, I'm just not going to acknowledge the disability. It's like the elephant in the room. Like, we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to see it, which actually does a huge disservice to everybody. I think being able to ask questions in respectful ways. I think being able to ask, how we can make our spaces inclusive so that people feel included. I mean, that's a question that should always be welcomed. I think the other thing is, as a society, we place so much value on capitalizing off of our bodies that there's this deep-rooted fear in becoming disabled.
At work, I find people are usually nervous about saying the wrong thing. It kind of makes me sad because we learn by mistakes. And I think a lot of people may have had bad reactions to mistakes and it makes them fearful. So they just don't talk about it.
I might have misspoke. I think there's one more short video. I know there is, and we'll end with that. But, and just to set that up, it's we know a big fear too is knowing when to offer help, or when not to. It's a real challenge for folks, and because we do things differently, it may look like we're struggling, and sometimes we're not. So last video, there's a little bit of me of the host in it, but the important stuff, the good stuff, comes from Tracy and Julie, who give some tips around the offering, asking for help.
How do you know when to offer help to someone with a disability and when not to? Really, there never should be a reason not to. Sometimes it will be welcomed and sometimes not needed. Light bulbs and lids are my nemesis. Well, anything that calls for a wrist, really. Do I need help with those things? Technically not. I manage, but I gladly take it when it's offered. If someone appears to be struggling with something, of course it's okay to ask if you can help, just like you would ask anyone else. But it's good to not assume someone needs help just because they have a disability. Important too, ask the person with a disability directly, not their friend or spouse or companion. Here are 2 tips on delivering help from Unstoppable Tracy and Julie Sawchuk.
But if you really don't know, you can ask, is there anything I can do to make it easier? Or would you like a hand? No pun intended.
The ATP principle, the ask the person, is what I try to get across in conversations all the time, is ask the person who seems like they might need help, but listen to the answer that they give. And when they say yes, listen to the instructions that come with that yes. When they say no, respect that no and don't second guess it.
One last quick story to Julie's ATP principle, ask the person. I was on a flight from Toronto to Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, and flying for people with disabilities is generally not a pleasant experience because of the confines of the airplane. And, we have to accept this. And for me, as a double arm amputee, I need space and room to move and operate. I stretch forward to open my hand. And so I asked for an aisle seat that would give me a little bit more moving room, sticking my elbow into the aisle to function. So it was time for snacks and beverages, and the flight attendant had the cart coming down the aisle. It parks right beside me, so I have no elbow room. I'm totally confined, and I say hello, and she sits a little back and asks me what I like, the pretzels or the cookies. I take the pretzels. And my wife beside me knows, right? And she sees I'm totally confined. So she holds out her hand to just take the pretzels. And with that, in asking what I wanted to drink, the flight attendant looked to my wife and asked, what would he like to drink? And she was looking at me faster than I was looking at her. And when I turned to her, she shook her finger and said, this is not a teachable moment right now. And I'm a good listener, particularly when it comes to my wife. But I mean, those are almost every day in the life of experience for us. And sometimes we need to take that initiative and correct. But there are times we just kind of take our lumps too. So one last takeaway. And the disability inclusion space, it's certainly an ongoing journey of learning and unlearning. And we're all at different points. in that journey, including me, including others in our community. And appreciating the lived experiences of people with disabilities of all types, and being allies, that creates inclusive workplaces and communities in and of itself. And we all have different ways of contributing. But discovery and empathy and learning are really good pathways to take for that comfort and confidence that I talked about earlier. And with that, I say thank you. If you'd like to learn more about the course, about what we do, disabilitytodaynetwork.com. And if you'd like to start a conversation, just put Jeff and the @ before that URL, and would love to hear from you. So again, thank you to the interpreters. Thank you to IWSCC for the opportunity, and thank you all for joining me this afternoon. Back to you, Alex.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for being with us yourself this afternoon. Even as an organization like the IWSCC, working with veteran-owned and disabled-owned businesses, I think it can often be the impression that professionals like myself and like my colleagues at the IWSCC are the experts, that we know everything there is to know about disability, about the experiences of not just the people that we work with, but about that community. I always like to, it's important for us to remind ourselves and to have these opportunities to learn as well. So I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to take part in today's lesson. And I hope everyone in our audience today is as well. We do still have a little time for questions. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask Jeff or myself, but honestly, Jeff is the much more interesting guy here today. You are welcome to add them to the chat. In a moment, I'll also be sending everyone a quick notification, giving you permission to turn on your microphones so that if it's an accessibility concern or if you prefer to ask your question by using your microphone, you'll be able to do so. But also please feel free to use the raise your hand option in your Zoom toolbar and to add any questions that you have into the chat, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. Also, before we go today, I'd just like to share in the chat for everyone, again, that contact information for Jeff Tiessen and for Disability Today Network. You'll find that link in the chat, a link to the IWSCC website if you'd like to learn anything else about what we do or learn about more events like this. We also have a very, very short event survey, which we greatly appreciate your feedback and your insight. If you loved it, if you want to see more of this, please let us know. It's what tells us that we're on the right track. So we'll hold for a sec just to give folks a moment to turn their microphones on and ask questions if they'd like, or to pop any questions in the chat. In the meantime, just to sort of give folks a little bit of time, if they have any questions, I have a question that I thought of. I suppose as a bit of a spoiler, I've had the privilege to take the Complete Mindset course. Of course, I highly recommend it to everyone here to learn even more, to hear even more stories and learn from more experience from such a wide range of folks. A question I have, and Jeff, that maybe this is a bit of I don't mean to frame the question negatively, but on the subject of asking folks for if they need help, and in general, like approaching persons with disabilities who maybe you don't feel confident, so you're doing your best to ask the right question. Do you have any advice for someone who is trying to ask the right question, maybe fails to sort of ask the question in the right way and does offend the person that they're speaking to. The persons with disabilities come in all strokes as well. There might be someone who's a little bit more outspoken about their discomfort or their frustration at your comment. Do you have any advice for maybe the folks out there who are a little bit fearful of that feeling of retribution or admonishment while they are trying to learn?
I mean, knowing that they may be saying the wrong thing, I mean, that's a great first step, right? That there's a sense of, yeah, I don't want to offend. What I heard consistently from our cast was, genuine intention wins the day. Let's start there. If someone's trying, we can work through it, and we don't offend that easily. We're not fragile. We like to say we've heard it all, but I'm not sure if I have just yet. I continually get surprised. So, yeah, it's a matter of just trying to push past that awkwardness, and we're responsible too. We're accountable. We don't expect perfection. I mean, these are all, pathways that that will take time for everyone to see as typical. So that's the learning process. That's the conversation. And I've had people ask, I'm not sure how to refer to your arms. Perfect. I call them prosthesis. Some people call them artificial arms. Questions. I think that's the place to start. Just ask a question.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, and it's definitely a lesson I took away not just from the course, but from today's excursion as well. Is that it sounds like it's all about conversations, being open-minded to growing and to hearing more opinions, to remembering to treat everybody like an individual when you meet them, and that every individual gets that same respect and that same honest attempt at inclusion. So it does look like maybe our guests today are feeling a little bit shy about asking questions. So I think that might be all for us today. So again, thank you, Jeff, Disability Today Publishing Group, and Mindset Courses for joining us today, for offering this really insightful lesson. Thank you, everyone, for joining us as well. And again, please investigate Mindset, investigate Disability Today Publishing Network to learn more about fantastic courses like this, and to learn more about publications that have disability in mind and at their heart. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the IWSCC and the ways that we help veteran-owned and disabled-owned businesses, of course, you can always catch us at iwscc.ca. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And thank you, Jeff. One more time, I could say thank you 1,000 times. Thanks again, Jeff, for joining us and sharing your expertise today.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. Bye.
Excellent. Take care, everybody.